Hello, I am Professor Kino, and welcome to my Office of Cinematic Antiquity. Today we will be talking about the first time I heard about John Wick was when a friend of mine insisted that I see it by repeating that it was like Taken but with a dog. So naturally, I thought that the film was going to be about a guy going on a revenge quest to rescue his kidnapped dog. Of course, for those who know the film, that was only partly true. In actuality, it turned out to be a film about a guy going on a revenge quest to avenge his dog's death. And to make matters more interesting, it turns out that John Wick is, or at least was before he retired, the best assassin hitman of a top-secret, globally powerful organization. And for those who don't know the franchise, this premise probably sounds ridiculous. But trust me, it's wonderful. It's got amazing action, an actually touching story, and introduces us to a fascinatingly cool world that really feels like it is part of our world, just unseen. And I adore it. And what's even better is that when its sequel came out a few years later, which was a pleasant surprise to all us Wick fans, it was the perfect sequel. It upped the breathtaking action, expanded on the world, but still kept it mysterious enough to be interesting, and delivered a satisfying story. And now here we are, John Wick Chapter 3. The second film does end on a cliffhanger, so I was pumped to see what happens next in the life of John Wick. So does the third film maintain the excellent standard of the John Wick franchise? Premise. Now that John Wick has been excommunicado and has a $14 million bounty on his head, he must push himself to the limit if he wants to escape New York City and finally find the freedom he is looking for. Writing. Being the third film of this franchise, this movie does not wait around to catch everybody up and just jumps right into it. It begins with John frantically running about New York City, trying to get all his affairs in order right before his bounty becomes active. Fans of the franchise have just enough time to orient themselves back into this world before the stuff that most people came to see this film begins. The action. While I will touch on it a lot more in the choreography and cinematography sections, I will say that the film's story creatively puts John in varied locations and in wild scenarios that push him and force him to adapt. And what's amazing about that is that it allows us to see exactly why he is considered the best assassin hitman in the world. While we get a good idea as to why in previous films, because he just kicks ass in them, this film's plethora of perfectly placed sequences repeatedly shows John's ability to use any surroundings and items to their fullest potential repeatedly. This film shows us without a doubt that John is proficient and deadly with anything from a gun to a knife to a horse to a belt to a book. John is able to make anything lethal, and the first act of this film alone should satisfy any John Wick fan because of this. Action aside, the rest of this film's story is very much in line with the story of John Wick 2. As John goes from location to location, we are subtly introduced to even more aspects of this hidden world of hitmen and assassins. While the film never sits down and directly explains what everything is and what it all means, it does provide just enough meat to make each new addition to the mythos make sense and stay intriguing, while also maintaining their aura of mystery. Every story beat here serves to expand the world of John Wick, and they all do marvelous jobs at doing just that. Despite all of this though, I do have a few negatives. One is that since there is so much action, the sheer amount of it can get a little exhausting. When the film spices itself up with the addition of unique locations and weapons, it stays strong, but when it falls back on simple gunplay, it can end up feeling a little seen it before despite being handled really well on a technical standpoint. And the only other negative is that this film does end on a cliffhanger. I just wasn't expecting it, and felt that the film is not fully conclusive narratively, and thereby doesn't end on a wholly satisfying note. But then again, it does set up for an even more explosive next chapter, and I can't really get mad at the fact that we will be getting more John Wick films in the future, because this film has proven that the John Wick franchise is one of the most consistently entertaining, quality, world-building action franchises out there, and I love it. Acting. Keanu Reeves gives one of his best performances again as John Wick. Reeves has been, and still is, consistently engaging, sympathetic, strong, surprisingly funny, and just plain kick-ass as Wick. This role was made for him. Ian McShane also returns as Winston, the manager of the New York Continental Hotel, and he is just as charismatic, sly, and mysterious as he always is in this role. Also back is Lance Reddick as Karen, the concierge of the New York Continental Hotel, and while we still don't learn much about him, he also gets a lot more to do, and he is as entertaining as ever. And Lawrence Fishburne also returns as the Bowery King. He is also good to see again, but he doesn't get all that much to do in this film, unfortunately. And as for newcomers, one of the biggest ones is Halle Berry as Sophia, a skilled assassin hitman like Wick, and she just kicks just as much ass as Keanu does as Wick. She waltzes right into this film and dominates the scenes that she is in. Angelica Houston makes an appearance as the director, and she holds a commanding presence whenever she is on screen that is perfect for her character. Aja K. Dillon takes on the role of the adjudicator. While I didn't think her character was super intriguing, she helped to build on the world of John Wick, and Dillon does a fine job. Mark Dacascos also comes in as Zero, a hitman assassin that is on par skill-wise with Wick, and he makes a solid adversary. I didn't like him as much as Cassian in John Wick 2, but Dacascos does a great job and is definitely very memorable here. And there are also just so many other new actors here that come in and do fantastic jobs as well, such as Saeed Tagmaoui, Jerome Flynn, Robin Lord Taylor, Yayan Ruyan, Sesep Arif Rahman, and even more. This film is just packed with excellent performances from everyone involved. Costumes, hair, and makeup. The costumes, hair, and makeup aren't anything too amazing. Like all the other John Wick films, the primary looks here are dress clothes and tattoos. However, there is a moment when John travels to Casablanca, and there is some nice Moroccan fashion showcased. But this movie relies heavily on making its characters not too flashy in order to drive home the idea that everything in it takes place in our world, but just out of sight. And for that, it works. Set design. While none of the sets are super standout, it is worth noting that there is quite a variety of them. From hotels to antique gun knife stores to stables to the streets of Casablanca to deserts to even more, the sets here are primarily used to either build on the world of John Wick or used to provide a cool and new set piece for John Wick to fight in. And they all kept the film's world feeling fresh and interesting, and they gave John some cool things to work with as he dispatched his enemies one by one. Choreography. Okay, this film's choreography is masterful. It's John Wick. Just like with the first two films of the franchise, every single action scene here is painstakingly managed to feel effortless and realistic. Not only are the action scenes hella fun to watch, but they make John feel like a real person. They count the ammo in the guns so they're realistic. John's enemies don't just go in one at a time to get picked off, etc. Every action scene here is brilliant and creative. From using dogs to guns to hand-to-hand fighting, every scene is choreographed to perfection. It is hands down the best part of the film. Cinematography. Not only are there just a lot of gorgeous shots of this film's sets, the streets of New York for instance are captured beautifully, but the action in this film is made even more perfect because of the film's reliance on wide takes. So many times when the action is going on, the film just shows the action. It doesn't try to use camera angles to add some effect or something. When the action is on screen, it's just the action. And it really helps to show the film's magnificent choreography. Overall, this is a gorgeous looking, stylish action film. Editing. This film tries its best to not edit around all that much, particularly during its action scenes. The only time that this film does so are to either get a better angle of the action because a new person entered the fray, for example, or when the film needs to show us something specific, like a gun getting kicked away. And this type of minimal editing is exactly as it should be in an action film. It allows us, the audience, to actually appreciate the wonderful action on display. CGI. I am sure there was some CGI used here and there, especially with the blood splashes, etc., but most of this film relishes in the fact that its stunts and action scenes are all real, so the CGI is just used to touch up little details and is in no way a massive distracting part of the film. Music. The music in the John Wick films has never been particularly astounding, but it always does a good job at setting the atmosphere for the action scenes. The songs all work together to make the film feel tense, and because of the way that the beats are used in a kind of TikTok fashion, make it feel like time is running out. This all does an excellent job at building tension and anticipation for the next action scene. It's just a really solid action movie soundtrack. Direction. Director Chad Stahelski has only ever directed the John Wick films so far. However, he has been a stuntman for more than 2 decades now, and this is why the John Wick films are some of the best action films. Stahelski knows how action works in cinema. He is a master of choreography and knows how to capture it in the best ways possible. And while the story of John Wick Chapter 3 is more or less action scenes melded with some brief moments of world building, that is okay because this is just a pure visionary action film made by an action choreographer slash stuntman for action movie fans, and that is just awesome. My enjoyment. Of course I love John Wick Chapter 3, it's plain awesome. As someone who loved the first two films equally, this third installment did not disappoint. Its action is on par with, and in some cases better than, the other installment's action, and while I did feel myself getting a little fatigued by the sheer amount of action in this film once in a while, I was always entertained. And I will admit that I was a little whoa when I realized that this film was going to end on a cliffhanger, but I can't say that I'm disappointed because it just means that more John Wick awaits me in the future, and I am super ecstatic about that. Recommendations. If you like John Wick, you should have a great time with this film. It's just more of what makes the franchise so great. Additionally, if you are a fan of action films, this is a great one. I haven't been this engaged in action sequences since, the other two John Wick films aside, Fury Road. All of it is just perfectly realized. However, for anyone looking for a brilliant story, this may not be the film for you. Chapter 3 continues to expand on the world of Chapters 1 and 2, but it is still just as vague and mysterious in doing so. Because of that, there isn't really a beginning, middle, and end here, more like a series of amazing action sequences strung together by various scenes that build atmosphere and set up the next fantastic action scene. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, check this one out, it'll be worth your time. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like. If you want to add anything, feel free to comment. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I'm Professor Kino, and I look forward to our next discussion.